whatever it is that you spend your time talking about, that's your true values. Do we spend all of our time talking about football and basketball and community, stuff going on in schools and everything else in the government, how much we don't like the government? Or are we going to spend our times letting our conversations be a sweet aroma to those around us about the things of God? So Moses tells them, don't forget these things that your eyes have seen. You guys in the room, any gray hairs in the room? You guys have lived it, right? Raise your hand if you're gray hair. Right? Yeah, be proud of it now. You've earned the right. You've been living it, right, sister? Yeah, you guys with gray hair, our culture is so unfortunate. Like, we don't know what to do with older folks. We have no idea when it comes to honor and respect when it comes to older people. So we send them away to live in some place, live in another home someplace. We'll come visit you when it's convenient, right? If I'm not busy, I'll bring the grandkids around every once in a while. You guys that are gray hair in here, I want you to hear this, okay? I'm not speaking at you, I'm speaking with you, okay? You have more influence than anybody else in this church. And so what we do is we hire pastors that are all in their 20s because they're cool and hip and all metrosexual and everything and cool dressers and have spiky hair and everything else, right? They don't really relate to people. I'm telling you, the people that have the influence in the church are you guys because you've lived the story. You've been walking for decades with God. And now what he wants you to do is not kick back and retire. Where did we get the concept of retirement? There's no such thing as retirement in God's economy. We work for his name's sake to make his name great, yes? From the day we're born until we're gone because we don't know how much time we have. So we're not kicking back at 65 playing golf or going to the country club. Man, those are the prime years to live because you've got all these stories to tell. These stories of God's faithfulness to you over the years. See, I've had to train my kids when they were young because young people don't know what to do with gray-haired folks. So when my kids were young and we were going to go visit my mom and dad at Mimi and Granddad's house, we were pulling up in the driveway and I would always say to them, now leave all your screens in the van. Don't take anything with a bright light on it in the house. Leave it all here. Now, when we go inside, it's Christmas, when we go inside, I want you to ask Granddad what it was like when he was a boy at Christmas time. I want you to ask your grandma, how did they celebrate Jesus' birth when she was a little girl at Christmas time? And every time we go visit, I was coaching my kids on things to ask their grandparents because my parents had a wealth of wisdom of walking with God that I wanted them to pass down to my kids. That's exactly what Moses says, isn't it? He says, these things that you treasure in your heart, he says, teach them to your children, and then to who? And to your children after them. Because if you don't pass down your story, it's gone when you are. That's how God's kingdom grows, guys. As when we take the truths, the things that we know to be true, not because we read it in a book, not because some preacher stood up here and told it to you, but you know it to be true because it's coming from your own story of faith. It's the one thing nobody can argue with. Right? I mean, you talk about, you share some story from your life about how God got you here to this country, and someone goes, I don't think so. Well, I'm sorry, it's my story. I lived it, right? You talk about how you were sick, and the doctor says, you better make preparations because we don't know how this is going to turn out. And all of a sudden, God's people come around and start beginning to pray for you. God performs a miracle, and someone goes, I don't think so. I'm sorry, I was the one in the hospital. I lived it. I know it's true, yes? Nobody can argue with your story. Those things that God, how he's shown himself to you and proved himself to you, pass them down to your children. Sometimes grandparents, parents, we got to be disciplined enough to turn the TV off, turn the screens off. Just take a few minutes and help our children by sharing these stories of faith with them. Well, then Moses, he gets to kind of the climax of his story, of his own message. This is his last speech. It's in Deuteronomy 6. Turn with me there. And this is what he says in Deuteronomy 6. It's actually a passage that we hear in the Gospels, the first part of it, because Christ himself repeats it. And this is what it says in Deuteronomy 6, verse 4. He says, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. This is actually called the Shema. It's the most important prayer to the Hebrew people back then and today. If we were a Jewish family, what we would have done this morning, we would have woken our children up, and before we ever left the house, we would have gathered our children together, and we would have said the Shema. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. And when we would pray together with our children in the morning, it was a way of us dedicating our family to the Lord to say, God, you are the one true God, and today we commit ourselves to living for you. And at the end of the day, what we would do, we would gather our children together, we'd brush our teeth, we'd sit down and read some Dr. Seuss books together, and before they drifted off to La La Land, we would say the Shema one more time as a way of just kind of capping our day by saying, God, today we lived for you because you are the one true God. Now, I wonder, as Protestants, what might happen if we did the same thing? Kind of bookended our day by beginning it and ending it with just a moment with the Lord. I mean, we know our life, so often we live life out of chaos, don't we? I mean, like once the kids get up, mom, you know, you're struggling to get the peanut butter and jelly made and the stuff in the lunch bags and make sure everyone's got their backpacks and their permission forms and got their coats on and everything else, and the phone's ringing, you know, the water's boiling like there's 8 things going on at one time, and then as soon as you open the front door, forget connecting with God because now the chaos of life has begun, right? Amen. You know what I'm saying, right, Mom? I mean, it's like all of a sudden, you know, the agenda takes over. You know, so what if maybe like even tomorrow, before you ever put your hand on the doorknob, maybe you just pause at the front door and say, hey, guys, let's just take 30 seconds. Let's just pause, and God, we just commit ourselves to you as a family. Maybe tomorrow at the end of the day, you know, maybe some of you guys, you haven't prayed together with your kids in a long time. I know, especially if you got teenagers, it's just awkward sometimes. There was a survey done several years ago. This was in the Southern Baptist denomination, all right? And they asked parents who have young children under 10, they asked parents, how often or do you pray with your children on a regular basis? It was over 80% of regular church-going parents in the Southern Baptist denomination said, yes, I pray with my children on a regular basis. They asked parents of teenagers, do you pray with your teenagers on a regular basis? Less than 10% said yes. It's like all of a sudden we forgot. We let the chaos of life, the agenda, dictate us connecting with God and just bookending our day by beginning it and ending it with Him. Well, then he goes on to say this, and this is where I want us to camp out this morning. He says, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. Love the Lord your God with all of your heart, all of your soul, and all of your strength. That sounds familiar, doesn't it? This is what Jesus said. These commands I give you today are to be upon your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home, when you walk along the road, and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. This morning, I want to talk to you about 3 principles of leaving a spiritual legacy with your life. Because every one of us in this room, we're going to leave a legacy. And either it will be a legacy of making our name great, or making His name great. Those are the only 2 options. That when you die, either they're going to stand around, the only 2 days of your life that you get attention are the day that your birthday and the day that you die. Yes? So people are going to stand around and they're going to talk about you on the day that you die and say things like, oh, wow, man, he had a master's degree. And she earned a doctorate. And oh man, he was so wealthy. He had 3 houses and he had a lake house and a boat. And oh man, you should have seen it all. And oh man, she had so much influence in the community. Man, people listened to her when she spoke. And that day they're going to tell stories about you because you made your name great. Or they're going to stand around and share stories like Mr. Thomas. Stories of how you lived faith, hope, and love everywhere you went to make his name great. You guys that are teenagers, raise your hand. Teenagers here in the room, anybody? Raise your teenager, right? I should make you yell because you're loud all the time, right? Teenagers, okay, you guys listen to me. I'm speaking to your parents primarily this morning, but you guys don't tune your brains out, okay? Because you are leaving a legacy with your life. And these decisions you're making in middle school and high school, they matter monumentally because you're laying the foundation right now of what your legacy is going to be. And you want to have a solid foundation of faith in your life. You know, right now, what God is doing is He's writing the first chapter in your story of what your legacy is going to be. And don't you know, the first chapter is the most important chapter of every book, yes? The first chapter is the hook. The first chapter is where we get to introduce to the characters and what the conflict's going to be and the love interest, you know? And so make this first story of your life the best chapter. So when people look back, they're going to go, wow, this teenager, man, they did it different. And he loved differently. She led differently. They engaged their peers differently. So you guys tune in with me as well. The first principle is this, that if you're going to leave a spiritual legacy with your family, that you have to connect with God's heart first if you're going to lead your own family. So often what we do is we lead out of emptiness. Our kids come to us, and your kid maybe doesn't get the grades on the report card that you thought they were going to. Maybe your son comes home 45 minutes late after curfew. Maybe your daughter brings some boy home that you're like thinking, I don't think so. Maybe your middle schooler, all of a sudden they're developing an attitude, and they're talking back to you, and you think they're being disrespectful. So how do we respond in these situations? Right, all of a sudden, we respond by snapping back. We respond by yelling and get a little bit louder. Maybe we respond by rolling our eyes or huffing our voice. Oh, my gosh, when are you going to stop doing this? And all of a sudden, we're leading out of our emptiness. And if we're going to leave them to discover who God is, we have to first be filled with His Spirit. Now, it's kind of like what we do throughout the day, all of us. As God gives us these opportunities, He fills us with His Spirit, and all throughout the day we're out there loving people by the way that we touch them and look at them and spend time with them and listen to them. And God is like He's pouring out His Spirit out of us on everybody around us. So by the end of the day, it's almost as like we're empty vessels again. And we wake up in the morning, and either we're going to let the agenda of life dictate how we're going to love our families and lead our families, or we're going to pause and say, God, I got nothing to offer my family today. I'm empty. I need you to fill me. So we know this in so many areas of life, don't we? You go to the gym, we have great intentions in our culture, but really poor execution so often, right? Number one New Year's resolution is what? Yes, exercise. I'm going to exercise. I'm going to have an agenda. We're going to start exercising. I'm going to join a gym. Oh, gyms love New Year's. Yeah. Did you know 90% of people who join gyms stop going after the first 30 days? They keep paying for it so they can carry the card, but they never go back because they had great intentions, poor execution, right? Your dentist comes to you, and the dentist says, have you been flossing lately? What he means, like, have you been flossing every day? And you think, okay, I remember like a couple months ago. And so you go, oh yeah, I've been flossing, right? But that's not what he means. It means like, have you been doing this every day? And we know the same thing spiritually, right? Like we know that we have nothing to offer our kids if God doesn't fill us. But instead we get up and we immediately let life dictate how we're going to live instead of stopping and saying, God, you have to fill me first. I'm so blessed that I have this life mate, my spouse, that she gets this way better than I do. And I'm much more of the leader mentality of I'm going to get up and I'm going to conquer life today. And instead, she knows as a mom that if she's going to spend time with the Lord, she better do it before the kids get up. Because then, there is no more connecting with God because the kids are going to take over, yes? And so her habit has always been to get up in the mornings and to go outside and spend some time with the Lord out there in the hammock by herself. So several years ago, my son was 7, my daughter 5 at the time, and he came into our bedroom and he goes, hey, Dad, I can't find Mom. I need to talk to Mom. She's not in the living room, and I checked in her bathroom. He was always going in the bathroom when she was in, because that's the only place Mom can go, right, to get away, right? Like that's literally your throne. Like, this is my one place of solace. Lock the door, lock the door. And anyway, so he was like, I can't find Mom. And then my daughter, who was 5 at the time, she goes, Bailey, don't you know she's outside spending time with God? Right? Now, there's only one way that she would have known her mother was outside spending time with God, and it's what? She had caught her so many times spending time with God. My favorite picture that I own to this day was taken about 3 years later, where I got up one morning, and I was going to take my wife a cup of coffee outside. And I get to the back door to open the screen door, and I see my daughter, who was 8 at the time, and she's sitting in the hammock next to my wife with her little kid's Bible open. And all I could think of was, wow, from one generation to the next, that this is what it looks like to pass down a legacy of faith, to invite our kids into what God's doing in our own lives. The second principle is this. It's not just that we connect our hearts to God, but we have to lead our children to help connect, to discover God, who God is, help them find their place in God's world, what their role is in God's world, help them connect their heart to Him. Moses says it this way in verse 7. He says, impress these things, these truths, impress your story, impress them on your children. It literally means as if like to brand or to tattoo it onto them. So, hey, teenager, by the way, you want to get a tattoo? Just go to your mom and dad and say, hey, Moses said it was okay, right? Just impress it on me, all right? So, but if you do, that probably means you got to get a Bible verse, so you might want to second guess it, okay? Anyway, he says, impress these upon your children. Talk about them when you sit at home, when you walk along the road, when you lie down, when you get up. When is it that Moses is saying that we should be talking about the truths of God to our children? All the time. Now, I don't think he means literally every conversation is a conversation about the Bible. I think is what he's saying is, let our conversations that we as parents, as grandparents, we are so attuned to God's heart ourselves that it's almost as like his spirit just overflows out of us and our conversations are seasoned with truths about who God is and his ways. It's basically looking for teachable moments. And God gives them to us every single day. And so often we walk right past them and don't even notice. Do you guys ever have kids that play t-ball? Right, t-ball? It's not really baseball, but our kids feel like they really excel. Like, I hit a home run. I'm like, yeah, because I put it on a stick for you right there. I'm like, anybody can hit that. But our kids get so excited, I made it on base. And, oh, yeah, you just wait till 2 years when they're throwing it 70 miles an hour at your face and see if you make it on base, yeah? But as a 5-year-old, why do we put it on a tee? Because we want them to see it. We want them to hit it. We want them to feel a modicum of success in this, yes? Every day, God tees up spiritual, teachable moments for us as parents with our kids. It's like God just goes, I'm going to sit it right there. Do you want to hit it? And so often we go, I'm busy. And we keep on walking by. These teachable moments, they don't take a long time. A lot of times it's just a very short amount of time. My kids, when they were little, we used to watch TV on Sunday night. It was the only time we watched TV together as a family for 2 hours. We would watch the crazy show about the videos. What is it called? America's Funniest Home Videos. We would watch that show together and just watch people do dumb things. It was usually videos of teenagers doing dumb things, right? Exactly, yes? Because you guys are impulsive and you do foolish things. So it's okay. I was a teenager. I did dumb things too, yeah? So as well as your parents, okay? And then after that, we would watch the Extreme Home Makeover. Remember, it used to be on? And we had so many cool moments with our kids when they were little. They were like 6 and 8 at the time. And we would have these conversations about what it means to live selflessly and what it means to give of yourself and to sacrifice for others by watching this silly program about people rebuilding a community in someone's house. So one night we're watching this TV program and all of a sudden a commercial comes on, and it was a commercial about this group of housewives who were very desperate. And I have no idea what their desperation was all about because I never saw it, okay? But all of a sudden this commercial comes on and I reach the remote control. And the one time that I can't find it is right now, yes? And so literally I'm throwing the couch cushions, looking for the remote to change the channel. And as I glance over, my 6-year-old and 8-year-old, they're staring at the television. And I find the remote. It's like 20 seconds. And the commercial's over. And my first thought was, okay, don't make a big deal about this. Like, they don't even know what they saw. Just move on. The program's back on. Just laugh together and just keep on going. And immediately I felt the Holy Spirit said, I've teed this moment up for you. And if you don't have the conversation with them, no one will. So we just turned the TV off for a moment. I wasn't prepared to have a conversation with a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old about marriage fidelity. Have a conversation with them about God's gift of sexual intimacy and marriage. But hey, God teed it up. And so it's time for us to hit a home run. And so we talked for 3 or 4 minutes and then turned the TV on and went about our way. It only cost us a little bit of time. My kids, when they were little, they were the only kids I know of that had to walk through the mall staring at the ground. Because in our mall, I don't know about you, in most malls, there is a woman there named Victoria, and she has lots of secrets. Yes? And I don't think anything is a secret anymore, by the way. And so our kids, when we were walking by her store, I would always say, oh, hey, kids, look at the floor. And they would literally put their hands up like this to walk past her store. And so in our mall, her little secret shop is right there by the escalator. We're going at the escalator one day. My son was 11 at the time. And up on the wall of the escalator off to the side is this banner, vinyl banner advertising this new makeup. Right? And there was nothing inappropriate, sexually inappropriate about the banner. All it was a picture of a woman's face, just a headshot with a picture of this lipstick. No words even. And so I don't mean this to be funny. It was a very serious moment with my son. We're going up the escalator, and I see it. And I said, hey, Bailey, I want you to look at this. And he looks over, and I said, Bailey, do you see those eyes? Because the eyes is what they were trying to sell, right? You know these eyes, don't you, men? Those eyes that are seductive. And I looked at my son, I said, Bailey, do you see those eyes? I said, do not believe those eyes. I said, those are deceiving eyes that want to trap you. I said, buddy, those are bedroom eyes that you should only see when God brings you your wife. So when you see those eyes, you run. Do you understand, son? And he goes, yes, sir. And then we went and got ice cream. I mean, it cost me 45 seconds to have this moment that God teed up, right? I guarantee you, before tomorrow moment, God's going to put a T right there in your life. He's going to give you an opportunity to have a conversation with your kids, your grandkids, there in your house about spiritual truth as you walk along the way, looking for opportunities to help your child connect their heart to God's heart. The third principle is this. If we're going to leave a spiritual legacy, it's not about simply telling our kids, helping them understand who God is. It's about modeling the ways of God to your kids. It's one thing to say to our teenagers, you should go serve. It's a whole nother thing when we say, let us go serve. It's one thing when we say to our kids, you should go love people. It's totally different when you say, let us go love people in the name of Jesus. Maybe this year, your church, you guys do Vacation Bible School? Vacation Bible School, right. Every church does, right? It's like a God-given thing. We have to do Vacation Bible School. So let's say this year, instead of going to like your daughters and saying, you should go serve at Vacation Bible School this year. Moms, maybe what if you go to your teenage daughters and say, hey, this year, hey, why don't we like work in the third grade classroom together? Because then I guarantee you, she's going to grow up, and at some point in time when she's struggling with her faith, she's going to remember this moment where the two of you were serving the kingdom alongside each other. Maybe instead of like having some, like for the teenagers, let's go build some Habitat for Humanity house for some family in the community. What if your whole church, families come together and do this? This is what we do at our church. We have this every year in the spring. We build a home. They're in our it's the coolest thing. If you guys haven't done it before, you can contact them. It's really cheap to do. And we got about 40 dads that come out there with their little kids, right? I'm telling you, I can nail in a hammer, I can nail in a nail in 3 whacks. It takes my 5-year-old, 40 minutes, right? It's like grueling watching this whole process as I try to nail the nail on this board. But we did it every year because I want this memory of my kids to have of us serving God together. When I get invited to do like mission trips all the time, to speak at mission trips. And I decided several years ago that I know as a youth pastor, former youth pastor, that my kids are going to go on mission trips. But I didn't want my kids to have these incredible spiritual highs and me never get to be a part of it. I think it's such an injustice to God's way when God was all about the family connecting with Him. So I decided, hey, you know what? We're going to go on a family mission trip together. Our whole family. It doesn't matter how long it is, but I encourage you guys to do that sometime before your kids graduate. It could be a weekend, a day, a week. It could be here domestically or internationally, but just take some time for your whole family to serve together. We decided to go to Guatemala. It was on purpose because 2 reasons. We found a family there with the International Mission Board, and basically I called them up. Didn't even know them. I just called them up long distance to Guatemala. Hey, I know this person. You're a friend of theirs. They told me to call you. We could spend 2 weeks with you. We don't want you to create programs for us. We don't want you to do anything for us. I just want my kids to serve the Lord alongside of me on the mission field for 2 weeks. The second reason was because we have sponsored a little boy through Compassion International. Many of you are probably familiar with that, Compassion International or World Vision. And his name is Barcelo. We've sponsored him for 11 years now. He's the same age as my daughter. And so we started sponsoring him when he was 3 years old. And we write letters to him. So in our family devotion times in the mornings, at least when we get a letter back from him, we pause after reading his letter, and every one of us in our family, even our kids, when they were like 6 years old, they're writing letters to Marcelo. Every one of us would write a letter and send back to him, send pictures back to him, because I want my kids to connect and know what it means. That we do this together as a family. So we decided we're going to go visit Marcelo. You know, less than 1% of people that sponsor a kid ever get to see their sponsored kid. So Compassion, we called them and said, is this possible? And they said, yes, you'll have to pay for all of his expenses for his family to get from their fishing village up to Guatemala City, 3 hours away. They've never been away from their village before. And they're going to take 3 buses to get there. You got to take care of their food, their transportation. And I'm like, okay, well, how much is it going to cost? And they said about $78. I was like, are you kidding me? That's like dinner for my family, right? At a restaurant. You mean a life-changing moment for my kids for $78? I mean, tee it up. Let's go. I mean, this is easy. This is a win. So we got there, and our sponsor, and there's a translator, and they told us, they said, now he's never met anyone white before. He's never spoken English. He doesn't know any English. He said, and he's probably going to be very fearful of you. He's probably not going to talk a lot. And so we get there, and it's this little children's museum, and he's playing in this ball pit, kind of like at McDonald's. We have all the the dirty balls the kids play in. And so he's in the ball pit, and he's about 50 yards away. And the translator goes, Barcelo, Barcelo, and calls his name. He looks up and sees us. He starts sprinting. I mean, running full speed at us, jumps up in my wife's arms, right? I mean, we're sobbing. I mean, every one of us. I mean, before we ever got there, I'm thinking, wow, this is like the prodigal son in real life. You know, and I'm looking at my kids going, isn't this incredible? My kids are crying, as we're seeing, this is, God, we're doing this together. At some point near the end of the day, we had brought gifts for his mother. And his mother was like 4'11", and she was younger than me. I swear she looked like she was 80. Because all they eat is, black bean. They call them black beans and tortillas. And so we brought gifts for her and gifts for, basketball and Play-Doh and Legos and things like that and school clothes for him. And as she's opening her gifts, she just kept crying. And we speak Spanish. We couldn't understand her. And she's speaking very softly and meekly. And I asked the translator, I said, what does she keep saying? And she says, she just keeps saying over and over again, thank you for blessing my son. Thank you for blessing my son. Thank you for blessing my son. And we're crying, and I'm going, oh, no, you don't get it, honey. We're the ones getting the blessing out of this. And my kids have gotten to go to the Bahamas and Canada and Mexico and the Mexican Riviera. They've gotten to go all over the world, as part of our ministry together. If they were standing here and you asked them their favorite trip we've ever taken, they would tell you when they got to meet Marcelo. Because it's this moment where almost it's like we were putting a spiritual flag in our kids' life to mark this moment so they'll never forget it. That's what God gives you. That's what those teachable moments are all about, right? Is that you're leaving these spiritual marks in your children's life all along the way. Because if you don't make a big deal about it, and if you don't leave this spiritual path for them to find the way back home, nobody will. I mean, surely, you don't think that anybody in the culture gives a flip about your child connecting with Jesus, do you? I mean, surely we're not going to leave it up to the church. We're not going to leave it to the schools, are we? There was a Fuller Theological Seminary. They did a scientific survey with over 500 teenagers that are regular church-going teenagers to find out how many of them walk away from their faith after high school. Their conclusion, they tracked these kids from 7th grade through post-college. They found out that 55% of all kids that are regular church attenders will walk away from their faith after high school. They began to interview those students. 80% of them that walked away from their faith said, I don't know how this happened. Like, wow. 20% said, I don't know why it happened. All right? Then they began to interview those kids who had what they call a sticky faith. All right? Now, here it is, mom and dad. We're talking a 50-50 shot, right? That your kid's going to graduate out of the student ministry at your church. 50-50, they're going to walk away from their faith. I don't know about you. I'm not happy with those odds. Yes? So I'm not leaving it up to the youth group to spiritually disciple my children. Your youth group, you guys have got some incredible, youth pastors and youth workers and children's workers. They are cleanup hitters to you guys. You get this, right? You're the all-star. You're the one that God's looking to. God has intentionally placed your child in your home, your grandkids under your care to lead them to Christ likeness. And nobody in the world is going to care And if you don't do it, nobody will.